Early in the afternoon on August 4, 1964, just after 1 in the morning in the Gulf of Tonkin, an urgent teletype message flashed into Washington from the middle of the South China Sea. It came directly from Captain John Herrick, the commander of an American destroyer task force. His message wasn't a call for reinforcements, and it wasn't a confirmation of victory. It was a warning. Hours earlier, his destroyers had fired over 200 shells into the pitch-black night, convinced they were under attack by North Vietnamese torpedo boats. But as the ocean settled and the ships checked their records, Captain Herrick began to realize something was deeply wrong. He cabled Washington with a clear warning. Review of action makes many reported contacts and torpedoes fired appear doubtful. Freak weather effects and overeager sonarmen may have accounted for many reports. No actual visual sightings by Maddox. Suggest complete evaluation before any further action taken. It was a remarkably candid admission from a commander on the spot. He was telling his superiors that his ships had likely been shooting at ocean noise and radar ghosts. But back in Washington, top officials kept moving toward retaliation. They believed that signals intelligence provided solid proof that an attack had taken place. That proof wasn't coming from radar screens or sea captains. It was coming from a stack of freshly translated radio intercepts provided by American intelligence. But the uncertainty was visible inside the system, even if it failed to survive the trip to the final decision. Key intercepts did not prove a new attack had occurred. Instead, analysts were reading ambiguous chatter and reports from a battle 2 days earlier as proof of a fresh strike. To understand how Washington got trapped by a piece of paper, you have to go back to Sunday, August 2nd. Because on that day, there was no phantom battle. The shooting was entirely real. The destroyer USS Maddox was conducting an intelligence mission off the coast of North Vietnam. North Vietnamese commanders viewed the ship's proximity as a direct provocation, especially since South Vietnamese commando units had recently raided nearby islands. 3 North Vietnamese P-4 torpedo boats were dispatched to engage the Maddox. In broad daylight, the torpedo boats closed in. The Maddox fired warning shots, the boats launched torpedoes, and American naval jets scrambled from a nearby aircraft carrier to join the fight. When the smoke cleared, 1 North Vietnamese boat was left heavily damaged, and the Maddox escaped with a single bullet hole from a machine gun. Nobody disputed what happened on August 2nd. There were photographs, shell casings, visual sightings, and physical damage. But the engagement set off a wave of high tension across the fleet. American ships were ordered to stay in the Gulf, and a second destroyer, the USS Turner Joy, was sent to join the Maddox. The crews were told to expect retaliation. Sailors slept next to their guns, radar operators stared at monitors for hours, and the ships operated under high alert in unfamiliar, heavily restricted waters. Everyone on board was waiting for a fight. That fight seemed to arrive on the night of August 4th. But this time, nature provided a very different backdrop. There was no daylight, no clear horizon, and no calm sea. Instead, the destroyers sailed under a moonless, heavily overcast sky with poor visibility and high ocean swells. Suddenly, radar operators on the Maddox picked up strange blips. To a nervous crew, those blips looked like fast-approaching enemy torpedo craft. The Maddox and the Turner Joy began maneuvering violently, zigzagging through the storm while opening fire into the darkness with 5-inch naval guns. Down in the sonar rooms, operators put on their headphones and listened frantically to the ocean. Sonar in 1964 wasn't a crisp digital map. It was an audio stream of squeals, pops, and ocean noise. Every time a destroyer made a sharp turn to dodge an imaginary target, its own rudder created turbulent water right next to the hull. To an operator listening in a dark room under massive stress, the sound of the ship's own propeller wash could easily be mistaken for the high-pitched whine of an incoming enemy torpedo. Over the course of 2 chaotic hours, ship logs recorded over 20 reported torpedo attacks. When dawn broke, American aircraft flew over the area to search for debris, oil slicks, or wreckage, but found nothing. By that time, Captain Herrick had already sent his famous warning cable, telling Washington to pause everything until they could figure out what had actually happened. While Captain Herrick was trying to pump the brakes from his ship, another chain of events was unfolding hundreds of miles away at intelligence posts across Southeast Asia. Stationed at places like Phu Bai in South Vietnam and San Miguel in the Philippines, American operators were monitoring North Vietnamese naval radio frequencies. These operators were part of the Naval Security Group, working alongside the National Security Agency. Their job was to intercept low-frequency radio chatter, log it, translate it from Vietnamese into English, and forward the results up the chain of command. Translating real-time military communications in 1964 was brutal work. The recordings were often static-filled, the terminology relied on localized naval jargon, and the translators had to work at top speed. On August 4th, these stations intercepted several North Vietnamese radio transmissions. Different errors occurred at different points in the chain. At Phu Bai, analysts intercepted orders for patrol boats to prepare for military operations. Though the message contained no specific targets, analysts assumed it referred to an active attack on the American destroyers. The most consequential error came from an intelligence product processed after an intercept at San Miguel in the Philippines. Analysts combined material mentioning that forces had sacrificed 2 comrades, with a separate report detailing vessel damage. To Defense Secretary Robert McNamara and his advisors, this appeared to be solid proof. Captain Herrick might be doubting his radar operators, but here was an intercepted intelligence product mentioning casualties and damage, seemingly admitting that a firefight was happening. There was just one problem. The intelligence analysis had conflated separate messages and completely misread the context. Decades later, internal investigations revealed that the reference to sacrificing comrades was not sent during a new battle on August 4th. NSA historian Robert Hanyok concluded that the reference most likely concerned losses suffered during the real battle on Sunday, August 2nd. NSA analysts had taken radio chatter transmitted on August 4th, combined 2 separate intercepts into a single report, and mistakenly matched them with the events of Tuesday night. To make matters worse, routine administrative messages, such as orders for patrol boats to assist stranded vessels, were translated using aggressive combat phrasing. Orders to monitor American ship movements were rendered as active attack instructions, while reports on salvage operations from Sunday's battle were presented as live updates for Tuesday night. Washington did ask for verification, but the checks never overcame the overwhelming assumption that an attack had already happened. Top officials were working under an assumption that had hardened rapidly. They were convinced that North Vietnam was testing American resolve, and they wanted a clear, decisive response. When Defense Secretary Robert McNamara briefed President Lyndon B. Johnson, he presented the NSA intercepts as firm confirmation of an attack. While reports coming from the ships continued to contain serious doubts, those doubts did not overturn the SIGINT-based conclusion presented to Johnson. Intelligence reports were gradually filtered. Briefings to decision-makers smoothed over the contradictions until the evidence presented to the White House looked completely solid. Before midnight on August 4th, President Johnson went on national television to address the American public. He announced that American naval vessels had been attacked on the high seas and that retaliatory airstrikes against North Vietnamese naval bases were underway. 3 days later, on August 7, 1964, the United States Congress voted on what became known as the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. The document gave President Johnson sweeping authority to conduct military operations in Southeast Asia without a formal declaration of war. During congressional briefings, administration officials presented the second attack to lawmakers as confirmed, without giving Congress the full extent of the doubts coming from the ships. Relying on those assurances, the House of Representatives passed the resolution unanimously, while the Senate approved it 88-2. Over the following months, American combat troops were deployed to Vietnam, opening the door to a massive military escalation. For decades, the official government narrative held that North Vietnam had launched 2 unprovoked attacks on U.S. ships, and that intelligence logs proved it. The full SIGINT picture didn't emerge until the late 1990s, when an internal NSA historian named Robert J. Hanyok was given access to the agency's classified Tonkin archives. Hanyok set out to write an exhaustive internal history, re-examining every raw intercept logbook and translation file from August 1964. What he uncovered was remarkable. Hanyok discovered that nearly 90% of the relevant SIGINT gathered regarding August 4th had been omitted from post-incident summary reports and later official chronologies. Some of the most important products that remained had been mistranslated, stripped of context, or conflated with separate messages. Hanyock concluded that NSA analysts hadn't necessarily executed a top-down conspiracy from day one. Instead, early translation and analytic errors reinforced the belief that an attack had occurred, and subsequent reporting was selectively filtered to support a narrative that personnel already believed was true. Hanyock completed his study around 2001, but the monograph remained internal until late 2005, when the NSA officially declassified and released it to the public. The Gulf of Tonkin crisis didn't stem from a single miraculous typo or a clean master conspiracy. The decisive failure was that uncertainty was gradually stripped from intelligence reports until Washington was presented with a certainty the evidence never deserved.